Nope, never mind. Hello, humans, and welcome back to another edition of the Retro Rumble, your one-stop shop for wrestling retrospectives. My name is Blake Spivey, and today, let's talk about my review of AEW Revolution 2023. All Elite Wrestling has had a wild few years. From first arriving on the scene in 2019 to winning the Wednesday Night War by a country mile, AEW seemed unstoppable from late 2019 to mid-2022. Built on the shoulders of Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Chris Jericho, AEW got off the ground far quicker than other upstart promotions. In turn, this allowed new stars to flourish in AEW by going up against these top guys. Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, Sammy Guevara, and MJF were considered the four pillars of AEW because they were the first guys really pushed in a singles manner on AEW programming. These four signified the next generation, which is sort of what AEW was trying to be from the outset. A big situation AEW was the focal point of was signing talent that had recently left WWE. Sure, Cody Rhodes and Chris Jericho were there from the outset, but things started to debatably get out of hand when Shawn Spears, Jake Hager, Brody Lee, Matt Hardy, FTR, and so many more came over to Jacksonville. It seemed like these signings would never stop, and AEW's roster started to look like they had asked WWE if they could copy their homework, and WWE said, yeah, sure, just change it up a bit so it doesn't look like we cheated. There was perhaps no bigger signing in AEW history than this guy.
What does everybody want?
Again? No. I mean, this guy. CM Punk officially debuted for AEW on August 20th, 2021, in front of a nearly standing room only United Center in Chicago, Illinois. Almost immediately, his return sparked one of the most hostile wars in wrestling history. Now, I'm not saying literally. I don't think CM Punk's return to wrestling sparked legitimate fights in arenas, although I wouldn't put it past some fans. Punk's arrival in AEW was one of the biggest examples of a WWE guy coming over the company had seen to this point. On television, and for real, depending on who you ask, one of the most vocal AEW roster members who didn't like CM Punk's presence in the company was MJF, and he let you know it. MJF cut promo after promo, hating CM Punk for merely existing on the AEW roster, for taking his spot on the card, and taking the spotlight of other young up-and-coming stars in AEW. These promos eventually led to a feud between the two, which culminated at Revolution 2022, in which Punk defeated MJF in a dog collar match. CM Punk then transitioned into a feud with AEW champion Hangman Adam Page, which led to their title match at Double or Nothing. CM Punk won the match and then immediately got injured. A tournament was needed to crown an interim AEW champion, which was won by Jon Moxley. CM Punk returned from injury, and it eventually led to a title unification match to crown an undisputed AEW champion. Moxley won that first encounter, which eventually led to All Out 2022, where Punk won the title back from Moxley. Upon Punk's victory, he was confronted in the ring by MJF. The show went off the air, and that's where we were going, right? Right? During the all-out post-show media scrum, CM Punk called out Colt Cabana, Adam Page, and even called the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega
knuckle-dragging, honey-scrounging, grub oafish munching, mangy nugget.
It was later reported that Punk, Omega, and the Bucks had gotten physical backstage following this tirade, which led to all four men being suspended indefinitely. All that hype for CM Punk's return to professional wrestling washed away a year later. Punk's spot needed to be filled, so it was, by Jon Moxley. MJF, who had won the Casino ladder match earlier in the night, had challenged Moxley at Full Gear for the title. MJF won that match when Moxley's manager William Regal turned on him. The next Dynamite, MJF turned on Regal, saying he didn't need it, and this ended William Regal's stint in AEW. MJF had beaten Ricky Starks at Winter is Coming, and we were now in the build-up to Revolution 2023. MJF, 1 year on from the dog collar match, was set to challenge the American Dragon Bryan Danielson in a 60-minute Iron Man match. You add that to Ricky Starks versus Chris Jericho and the Elite versus the House of Black for the Trios Championships, and you've got yourself a pretty good pay-per-view lined up. Did they do it, or did they fumble the bag? Let's get into my review of AEW Revolution 2023. Now, before I get into the review, I want to send a special shout out to Victor Perry and the wrestling club over at Kip Amp Middle School. You guys are the best thing about wrestling right now, and I want you guys to keep that fire going. You guys show such passion, and it reignites my passion as well. So I appreciate you guys for being the best fans on the planet. Now, let's get into the review. We kick things off on the Revolution 0 Hour pre-show as the Lucha Brothers, Penta El Cerro Miedo, and Rey Fenix team with Ring of Honor Tag Team Champion Mark Briscoe as they take on the Varsity Athletes, Tony Nese, Josh Woods, and Ari Daivari. The match spirals out of control pretty quickly, as trios matches often do. Rey Fenix has a lot of high spots, which is very exciting to see. Closing spot here is Penta El Cerro Miedo has Tony Nese in a gory special. He has Josh Woods in a pedigree position, and with Rey Fenix's help, plants both men, leaving Woods open for Mark Briscoe to hit the froggy bow for the 1-2-3. Overall, a great match to get the crowd going. Not a whole lot of build to it, kind of pushed together at the last minute, but as a match, it was pretty good. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Now, if you didn't watch my Men's Royal Rumble Match 2023 review, go and watch that as well. My grade on my 10-point review scale depends on if it got over who it needed to, the overall quality of the match itself, and the spectacle of the event overall. The main Revolution pay-per-view starts off with a grudge match, pitting Absolute Ricky Starks against the Ocho, Chris Jericho, with the Jericho Appreciation Society banned from ringside. Starks gets things going with some shots in the corner. Jericho gets some heat by basically doing anything because Starks is that over. A fun spot for me was Starks running and jumping into a code breaker, but he kicked out. Out comes Sammy Guevara, who was banned from ringside, but he's stopped by Action Andretti, who has been a thorn in Jericho's side for quite some time. The closing spot in one of the most anime things I've ever seen in wrestling, Starks blocks the Judas effect from Jericho and then hits the Rochambeau for the win. Overall, a really good opening match to the actual pay-per-view content. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Dating back most of a year now, Christian Cage and Jungle Boy have been at each other's throats at every turn. This feud featured Christian Cage turning Luchasaurus heel, and Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy having a steel cage match at Full Gear back in November. This feud seemed like it had ended there in a really great way, actually, but as soon as Christian Cage was cleared from injury and returned to television, Jungle Boy was right there, and we were right back to where we were. Thus, we get Christian Cage versus Jungle Boy here at Revolution in the final burial. Something that sounds like it should be a buried alive match, but it's just a casket match. I'm sorry, I just was not invested emotionally in this match like it was supposed to. Not because the match wasn't good, and, you know, Jungle Boy's a good character, but the feud ended already. The feud ended back in November in a great way. I just don't understand why we needed this match. But I can't say it wasn't bad. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10 because Christian Cage and Jungle Boy, both good workers, work well together. It's a decent match. It probably would have gotten a higher rating out of me if this was the match that happened back in November. The Elite were the first ever Trios champions in AEW history, and then immediately got suspended for fighting CM Punk at All Out. Death Triangle, Pac, and the Lucha Brothers took their spot as champions for a hot minute until their return. Then they had a feud for the titles. The Elite won that feud, and now here we are at Revolution with the Elite defending the Trios Championships against the House of Black, Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews. First things first, Kenny Omega's Like a Dragon Ishin-inspired attire, fantastic. This match did what it was supposed to do. Get the House of Black over as dominant, get Brody King specifically over as incredibly dominant, and pass the torch to a new Trios team that was not the Elite at the top of the division. Tons of false finishes, great selling from the likes of Omega and Buddy Matthews, and the crowd was on their feet and cheering and invested in every second of this match. I give it a 9 out of 10. Jamie Hayter won the AEW Women's World Championship back at Full Gear in November and has slowly, organically turned babyface since. Saraya, formerly known as Paige in WWE, made her debut at that same show, defeating Hayter's good friend, Dr. Britt Baker. Ruby Soho kind of is caught in the middle of all this, and the story going in is, which side will she choose? Side with the AEW faithful, Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker, or will she side with the former WWE team, Saraya and Toni Storm? The match itself wasn't terrible, it just wasn't really mind-blowing to me. Sure, Saraya gets heat in spots, and Ruby Soho and Jamie Hayter have good friendly competition, which ends in the closing spot with Hayter rolling Soho up for the 3 count. Nothing just really surprised me here. After the match, Toni Storm attacks Jamie Hayter, to which Britt Baker runs into the ring and evens the odds. Saraya and Storm take out Hayter and Baker when Ruby Soho finally chooses her side, aligns with Hayter and Baker, and sends Saraya and Storm packing. Nope, never mind. Ruby Soho kicks Jamie Hayter in the face, plants Destination Unknown on Britt Baker, and joins sides with the ex-WWE team. Overall, not a great match, not a terrible match. It was a 7 out of 10, but then the Ruby heel turn surprised me really a lot, so I'm going to bump it up to an 8. Now, originally in this script, I had shouted out the wrestling club before this match, but I don't want them to hear about it if they don't want to. Up next, it's Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley in a Texas death match. Now, I love me a good death match, but I do think that there's a limit to where one can go. You see, the thing with this style of wrestling is that everyone's tolerance level for violence in wrestling is different. So, if you're a bit squeamish and don't really like excessive violence in wrestling, this one's not for you. You might want to skip this one. Things get bloody pretty fast. There's not a whole lot I can talk about here that's safe for this kind of a show on YouTube, so I'll just leave it at that. I'm personally giving the match an 8 out of 10, but if excessive violence isn't for you, just kind of skip past it. There's not a whole lot that can be said about Wardlow versus Samoa Joe for the TNT Championship, so I'll let Big E explain it for me.
Big meaty man slapping meat.
Wardlow's first reign with the TNT title wasn't all that eventful, but he and Joe beat the mess out of each other in this match, ending with Wardlow locking Joe in his own Coquina clutch and making Joe pass out. Hopefully, Wardlow's second reign with the TNT title is a lot better than the first. Dang it. A trend I've noticed in my time as a wrestling fan is that if you get put on a pay-per-view in a big multi-man tag match, creative usually has nothing for you. The problem with this next match is that we're talking about the AEW Tag Team Champions, Austin and Colton Gunn. The match is serviceable, and there are 2 teams going in that will benefit from winning, that being the former champions, the Acclaimed, or the team of Orange Cassidy and Danhausen. But the Guns just win. It's, a hectic tag match with a bunch of teams with no real direction or anything, and the Guns just win. It shows that they're kind of the epitome of transitional champion, and their post-match promo shows just the most generic, we're the best heel promo possible, and they cut off a little too short before FTR's music hit and attacked him after the bell. So that's where we're going. Let's see what they can do. But as far as this match goes, I gotta give it a 6 out of 10. This is the only match on the card that, upon a second watch, didn't change my review. Alright, it's time for the main event. The story here is simple. The American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, is in the conversation for the best wrestler in the world. The AEW champion MJF thinks that he deserves that title because he is the champion. It's as simple as that. MJF knows that he's trying to get out of things easily and quickly, so Bryan Danielson challenged him to a 60-minute Iron Man match. Here we go. This match is brutal, but not like Moxley and Hangman from earlier in the night. This one is slow and methodical. We don't even get a single fall between the two until 25 and a half minutes in when Danielson scores the first fall. Going into the halfway point, the score is tied at 2-2 as MJF healed it up a little bit and cheated his way into getting 2 falls in a row. MJF is really good at screaming in agony, selling the moves, and it made us as fans feel like maybe the title reign could end short. It could end tonight. Danielson, who is a babyface, understands how matches work because his character is that he is one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. He knows the ins and outs of that ring, and he uses that style to his full advantage here tonight. As we enter the final 10 minutes, the score is 3-3, and commentary points out that we're basically back to where we started. There's no score difference between Danielson and MJF. It's almost as if the past 50 minutes of action was for naught. Danielson locks MJF in a submission hold and is just about to make MJF tap, but he holds on just long enough for the time to expire and the bell to ring, the score ending at 3-3. Both men are treated by medical immediately. MJF gets oxygen from a small oxygen tank that the doctors brought out with them. As both men receive medical attention, Tony Schiavone rushes down to the ring and explains to the referee and to the ring announcer that Tony Khan does not want this match to end in a draw and sends it into sudden death overtime. One final fall. Sudden death after an hour of action usually exhausts the crowd, but this crowd here in California for Revolution was on their feet. They were on the edge of their seat the entire time. It was incredible, and sitting at home, I was on the edge of my seat as well. MJF tries to use the AEW Championship as a weapon, but now realizes that he has no leeway. If he gets disqualified here, he loses the championship in a final fall. So, he gives the title back to referee Bryce Remsburg, but then reaches for the Dynamite Diamond ring out of his trunks. That doesn't work either, and Bryan Danielson hits the knee strike on MJF for the 1, the 2, and MJF just barely kicked out. It was a really, really tense moment. Danielson locks a single-leg Boston Crab onto MJF. Bryce Remsburg takes the Dynamite Diamond ring away from MJF. He has nowhere to go, and he finally is just able to grab the ropes with just his fingers. But at the same time of doing this, he taps. Bryan Danielson, not looking at MJF's hand on the rope, thinks he won the match due to a submission, so he gives up the hold. MJF slides out of the ring, and Bryce Remsburg has to tell Bryan Danielson that he has not won the championship. And this spot here is something I was incredibly impressed by because I didn't think at all that this was how the match was going to end. MJF grabs the oxygen tank he was receiving from earlier and hits Danielson in the head when the referee's not looking, and that still doesn't put Bryan away. MJF locks Bryan's signature move, the label lock, onto Bryan, and the referee does the hand drop, 1, 2, but Bryan holds it there. Bryan holds on for just one more second, but then MJF locks it in even further, and Bryan, who has started to lose feeling in his arms, has to tap out. MJF outlasts Bryan Danielson, wins the Iron Man match, and retains the AEW Championship. This match was freaking awesome. I didn't think these guys could make a 60-minute Iron Man match feel like it went by in an instant, but they made it work. Incredible spots, a really creative finish. I originally had given this match a 9 out of 10, but upon further review, I've got to give it a 10 out of 10 for the first time ever in the history of this channel. AEW's first pay-per-view of 2023 wasn't world-changing, but by no means was it remotely bad. And it was even better than good in some places. The top stars of the show were, Ricky Starks, MJF, Bryan Danielson, and the House of Black, notably Brody King. MJF Danielson was an Iron Man match for the ages, and other matches might have suffered in terms of time allotted, but they made it work with what they had. This show felt like any other AEW pay-per-view so far, but I think it's going to take a couple of years for them to really get that spectacle going. My overall grade for AEW Revolution 2023 is an 8 out of 10. It had some incredible star-making performances out of those I mentioned, Starks, King, MJF, Danielson, and it also featured some up-and-coming feuds and stories, such as, Axel Andretti interfering in the Jericho match. Hopefully, Jungle Boy can finally move on from Christian Cage, and let's see what's next for Hangman Adam Page after that Texas Death Match with Jon Moxley. Well, folks, that was my review of AEW Revolution 2023. What did you think? Do you disagree? What ratings would you have given these matches according to my 10-point review scale? Leave a comment down below. And hey, I've got a surprise for everybody. WWE 2K23 is launching this Tuesday, March 14th. And I'm going to be celebrating in two different ways. First, on release day, March 14th, I'm going to be live streaming my first impressions of WWE 2K23 on my Twitch channel, which I'll post a link to down in the description. Also, I'll be posting a video highlighting my history with WWE games, leading to a concise version of my first impressions of WWE 2K23. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when my videos post. And until then, I'll see you on Twitch.